Cross. How many of you have ever been really frustrated talking to someone that you probably care about in your life, and they are not understanding what you've said, and they're going, "What? No." And you're going, "What? No, that's not what I said." And you're both feeling like you aren't kind of catching each other's meaning. How many of you have been in that situation at some point? Excellent. Okay, so if you're human, pretty much, everybody usually has had that situation. I want you to picture the person in your life that happens most with, that you have this sort of clashing or this sort of gap or this frustration, that it's frequent. It's frequent with them. Often it's a significant other. It could be a person at work, but a person that we see a lot. So whoever you're picturing, I want you to picture for most of the time today, that one person. And I want you to think about, what would it be like if you were to understand each other better? What would it be like if you had less of that clashing and more of the satisfying feeling of, I get you, I get where you're coming from. So think about that. Now you guys have had for 6 months, and congratulations, I hear yourself around. So awesome, you've had 6 months of together building this amazing Oasis community. And part of what you're doing here is celebrating differences. That's part of why you came together. That's part of why Helen started this. And I'm so impressed with Helen for so many reasons, but I'm really impressed with what she and you together have been able to do here. And if you're here to celebrate differences, then part of that has got to be also with the most important people in your lives, right? Wouldn't that be nice and make sense? Okay? So, in over 20 years in the communication field, I can tell you that the biggest factor in the satisfying relationships increasing and the icky frustration of the bad side of conflict decreasing is expectations. Okay, so we don't realize that's what's going on, but we expect other people to do what we would do. We expect other people to do it our way. So if you hear statements like, well, I didn't know this job was going to be like this. Well, I didn't know marriage was going to be like that. Well, I didn't know church was going to end up being like this. All those things, our underlying message is, this is not what I was expecting. But we don't realize that what we are expecting can be very different what the other person is expecting. And so what happens is, there's blame. Ever feel like with that person you're picturing that you're practically speaking a different language from each other? How many of you felt that way? Yeah, okay. So, watch this. On the one hand, we have a person that grew up in Spain, all they've ever spoken is Spanish. They don't know English. And on the other side, we have a person that grew up in England, all they've ever known or spoken is English, and they don't know Spanish. Normal? Do you see a problem there? I mean, that's just normal, right? Why would the one know, or the person from Spain know English, and why would the person from English know Spanish? It's really that different. So when you feel like you're speaking a different language than one of your most significant others, you kind of are. So let yourself be okay with that, and realize there's no blame needed. Because what we do is we go, why don't you do what I would do? Why are you saying this kind of thing and being mean? Or why are you speaking in code? Right? So we have the blame situation because we don't realize how different our expectations are. So there's 3 things that we can actually do to improve our conflict resolution where it's the productive part of conflict and not as much of the icky. The first one is we got to recognize our own style or approach. The second is we've got to learn the other person's language or approach. And then the third is we've got to adapt to each other. And it's faster if we do both of us adapting to each other. So the first of these, to recognize your own approach. There's a spectrum of directness. And I used to teach college for many years, and one of the things when I taught conflict resolution, the old textbooks that about a decade ago I taught from had 5 approaches. Now if you look up online today and you try to Google what I'm talking about, you will find 4. They have done away with one of them, and I do not agree, so I'm going to do it this way. On this side, you have less direct or indirect, and it's a spectrum of directness. So there are 5 approaches that fall, but you may use different ones, and you may move back and forth on this. The first one is actually non-assertion. This is the one that has gone away. Okay? The second one is indirect communication. And it's almost like they blended these two into one, and they call it usually passive, which to me is a little more negative word, so I also don't agree with that. The middle is assertion. And then we have passive aggression. And then we have direct aggression. Now, real briefly, what this is, non-assertion is, I don't care enough to say anything. I'm not comfortable with conflict. They don't even like the word conflict. So when you put a person that's toward the indirect side and a person that's toward the direct side together, they have the same interaction, just the two of them. This person comes out with a different feeling than this person did. This person comes out and goes, interesting discussion. And this person goes, we just had the biggest fight of our lives. Right? They don't even see the situation as being the same. So this person is going to feel like it was huge, and this person is going to feel like they wouldn't even call it a conflict. Or else they would call it a conflict, but they don't care. It's not a bad word in their head. It's not stressful the way it is over here. Okay? So this is, I'm not going to even say anything at all. That's non-assertion. Okay? The indirect communication, little tiny bit more direct, is they will hint at each other. Okay? So little things, so non-verbals, no, it's fine. Yeah, it doesn't really seem fine if you're paying attention to the non-verbal cues, but not everybody's paying attention to the non-verbal cues. Okay? So the hinting, where you're wanting to communicate something, but you're still trying to keep it a little bit gentle. Assertion in the middle is that you are asserting your own needs and wants without stepping on the other person's. So you will say directly enough what it is you want, but you will be careful not to make your needs step on the others. Okay? The next one, passive aggression. The aggressive part is that you want to send a message, so kind of like the hinting. The passive part is you won't necessarily own it if you get called on it. Okay? So this could be, and I know that we're going back to a younger time, but a lot of times this happens with roommates. So whether you're married and have a spouse, or you've got a significant other you live with, or if you've ever in your entire life lived with a roommate, maybe in college or something. And one is really messy, and one is really neat. And if the neat one chooses passive aggression as their way to send a message, they may take all the crap and the clothes and whatever that are on the floor of the slob and put it on the slob's bed. And then the person who's messy comes home and says, what in the world? What is this? Oh, I just was getting stuff out of the way. Yeah, they were not just getting things out of the way. They were sending a message, not cool, want to be able to walk from our bedroom door to the bathroom door without tripping over your socks. So the aggressive part is definitely sent a message. The passive part is, no big deal, wasn't bothered. Okay? Now, this one gets the worst rap. Passive aggression gets the worst rap. And the reason for it is, if it's the only thing we ever use, it makes people crazy. So you'll actually hear the phrase, crazy makers. But I will tell you, there is a place for this, because you still got your message across. They know you got your message across, but you didn't have to have a big knockdown drag out over it. Okay? Direct aggression is, as you would imagine, a little bit more forceful. Could go all the way to yelling, could go all the way to really, throw a pillow or something. Obviously, in extreme cases, you're in trouble. So in a really extreme case of a non-assertive and a direct, that's where you've got finally bordering on abuse. Okay? So I don't think most people are in that situation, but that's where it comes from. Okay? So, good and bad to both, all things. The good of non-assertion is they have a lot of stuff they just aren't worried about. The bad of non-assertion is that if something does really bother them, they're still not going to say anything, and it bubbles and bubbles and bubbles, and then all of a sudden they jump to here for a minute. You're like, whoa, where did that come from? Okay, so people are not expecting, if you've been here and suddenly your bottle bursts and you suddenly, kind of blow. Okay, that's because that stress has been building that whole time. So that's the tough side. Indirect, the positive side of that is it's gentler. You know, it's not going to be as much stepping on people, and yet it's sending those hints. The difference is, or the negative or challenging part is, if you're sending hints and the person you're sending them to is over here, they ain't getting any of them. Just those hints are going right past them. Like, well, I was trying to tell you. Really? Because I didn't get anything. Okay? I'm going to come back to assertion in a minute. Passive aggression, I kind of already said. The good is you get your message out. The negative is if you use it too much, then people feel like you're never owning how you really think or how you really feel. The obvious negative and direct is that it can feel abrupt to those on the other side. It can seem like it is a little bullying, or it could seem, at the very least, blunt, or like your thoughts or feelings are more important than the other side. The positive is always know where you stand. Always know where you stand. There's no guesswork here. Okay? So when we go back to assertion, I will tell you that you can look online. There's a Mayo Clinic. You guys, anyone not heard of Mayo Clinic? Okay. Yeah, so the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota is one of the forefront of medicine. And on the mayoclinic.org, they actually say you can reduce stress by being more assertive. Cool? Sounds good to me. Most books, most articles, most anything you look at will tell you that assertion is the way to go. And while I agree, it is not a magic formula. Okay? Anybody have an idea what the negative side of assertion may be?
You're gonna bump up against people and step on toes.
Absolutely you are. Absolutely. What's your name?
Kim.
Kim gets a book for being the first person to answer a question. So, as Helen knows, and the book is, by the way, not just as a quick disclaimer, not on conflict resolution, it's on public speaking, but the theory stays the same. The way I teach public speaking is that it's all about the audience. So you'll notice I'm going to mention 3, 4, 5 times today something specific about Oasis that you guys are doing that's cool. Because that's what I'm talking to today. So you don't ever want things to be, always exactly the same. But conflict resolution is the same thing. When you're dealing with another person, that's your one-person audience. And it's all about the other person's perspective. Okay? So you've got to consider where they are, which means even if you are assertive, so I'm a fairly direct person, I'm mostly assertive, I can even edge a little bit toward too much. In fact, when my husband and I were just dating almost 20 years ago, he would say, okay, you don't need to yell. And I would go, I'm not yelling, this is my normal volume. This is yelling! Oh, super productive. Lots of help there, right? And so I had to come to realize it doesn't matter that the dictionary says yelling includes higher volume. It matters he felt yelled at. He felt like I was yelling. So that's what matters. So I usually hear if it was tending a little bit too aggressive, and he was uncomfortable, even though he's pretty direct as well. So what happens is, like Kim said, if I'm assertive and I'm dealing with a very non-assertive person, they are going to still feel like I'm too much. They are going to still feel like, do we have to everything have to be a discussion? Do we have to have a talk about every single thing that occurs in every day? We just had one 20 minutes ago. Again, really? Okay, so we direct people are usually wanting to get it out, and people that are less direct are like, could you let anything go, like ever? Right? So the point is that if I'm here and someone's here, the meeting in the middle is not here. Right? I still have the responsibility to move toward them this way while they're moving this way. Because if the Spanish and English people, if only one learns the other's language, that's going to take a lot longer. And it's not going to have the same feeling. But if the Spanish and English person both learn a little bit of each other's language, it will have a much more partnership feel, and it will be faster and probably more effective. Right? So it's that much like it. It's that much like having a different language. So we have to remember that wherever we are, we've got to realize where the other person is. So the piece of blame is kind of what we need to take out. You guys at Oasis talk about avoiding labels. And while I agree with that in a sense, I do want you to kind of think about these terms and start to recognize what you use the most. There's usually a couple of these that you use the most. And when you recognize your own style, the part of that celebrating differences is that you've got to learn the other person's style. So the second piece, when you're learning their language or style or approach, you've got to notice it first. Okay, so that the cycle that just goes on and on and on forever, that just seems like it's the same fight we've already had 100 times, right? What you have to do is you have to stop that cycle by doing something different. And usually it starts when you notice that there's something going on that's this different style or language piece. So if you're on the direct side, you've got to start looking for the body language, looking for the hints, listening, going, okay, I asked if they cared if I went out with the guys, with the girls. They said, no, it's fine. So you have to start looking for that, the tone and the crossed arms and the turning away or the head down, any of those things. They're sending you a message. It doesn't matter that it's not the way you would send a message. You've got to start recognizing their messages, their language. You can't learn their language and adapt to it unless you realize what's going on and see it. Then you've got to remember to take out the blame, right? Why don't you speak Spanish? Why don't you speak English? Right? No, we would never say that, but we do say, why are you so mean? Why didn't you just tell me what you really think? I asked you and you said you were fine. Why do I have to learn your code? Another person's like, why do you have to be so, snotty about it? Right? So everybody has got their own way, and you know what? Most of the time, it's long since ingrained. Okay? They've been doing it their way for as long as you've been doing it your way. Okay? So you've got to be able to start recognizing it so that you can take the blame out and think from their perspective. Okay? Once you can do that, when you're thinking from their perspective, and at Oasis, I like that you guys say, people are more important than beliefs. A lot of times in conflict, what we believe is we're right. I mean, be honest with yourself. Is that not how we can say, yeah, I always think I'm right? Or I often think I'm right. Okay. So the problem is that when you think you believe that you are right, you're putting that ahead of the person. And they're probably doing the same thing on the other side, right? So you got to take that out and remember that core value for you guys. People are more important than beliefs. You say you're here to connect and inspire and empower. And imagine if that starts with just this one relationship that you're picturing. If you can connect better with them, inspire each other to learn some of each other's language, and empower each other to change just a little bit. It doesn't have to be giant steps, right? The last piece is that you want to then adapt to each other. So wherever you find each other on here, you want to start noticing those and just doing a little bit, just a little motions. If you try to take big jumps, it doesn't work as well and it doesn't last as long. But if you go, okay, I'm reading hints, so I just asked if you mind if I go out tomorrow night without you. You said you were fine, but you look like maybe you weren't. Does that bother you? Are you kind of bugged that I'm going out without you tomorrow night? Well, yeah, kind of. Okay, so the direct person's got to soften their approach and ask a non-threatening question about how they really feel so that they are safe to articulate with words the message they just sent non-verbally. And then the person that is less direct has to get out of their non-verbal world and answer the question that was warmly and honestly asked. Does that seem like not too hard? Right? When you think of it as little, just these little things, and then you start to realize that the gesture of respect and care that they paid you by asking the question or by saying what they really feel, whoever makes the first move, right? Then you literally are inspired to do it back, to try to do a little of their language back at them. So it's the awesome reciprocal nature of humanity. We want to do for others what they've done for us. Neighbor mows our yard or takes away stick. We want to do something back. It's just this cool, natural. I want to do what they did for me, or something back.
Without sounding condescending.
Absolutely, without condescension, without strings. So it's not the same if someone did it to get a favor in return, right?
Sometimes it sounds like that. Sometimes when, you'll ask that question, you're like,
doesn't look like, like you're happy about me going out. It's kind of in that tone, like, like, you don't look like you're fine with it, and I think the condescension,
Absolutely, absolutely, because
even when you're not really, like you're just saying,
right.
Like, you really don't look like you're fine with it.
Yeah, I'm going to give Melissa for her example of the other book. Very good. So what Melissa's saying, what's still underlying that is the blame. Well, you look like you're not really fine. Do you feel safe now to say how you really feel? No, but with a question, hey, you said you were fine, but looks like maybe not so much. Am I too much? Is this not comfortable for you? When you ask a question and you really think about that, it's different. If you break down the pieces of assertion and what we can do, a lot of it has to do with coming from the other person's perspective and asking some questions. You'll hear, and even one of the things on that Mayo Clinic article that I did not agree with is they talk about making I statements. So, I think this, or I feel this. Well, this comes under the language of responsibility, and to me, it depends on what you're doing with your I statement. So sometimes if you have I statements, it sounds just selfish. Well, I want this. I'm going to do that. Okay, that's a negative way to use an I statement. Owning your own feelings, yes. Well, I was a little frustrated. I thought we were going to be on the same page, and we weren't. What were you thinking? Okay, you statements. If you're making you statements according to the Mayo article, it's blaming. Well, sure it is. They go, you do this and you do that. Yes, that's blaming. But if you ask questions, how were you thinking this was going to go? How did you feel when I said that? That's a good use of you language, right? So it depends on how you use it, just like it depends on to whom you're talking or with whom you're having whatever discussion, argument, conflict, whatever you want to call it. So when you think about the fact that you're here at Oasis to have a like-minded community, you gotta think it's worth it, right? It's worth it to try to get on the same page, get your expectations aligned, not only with each other here, but with all the people that are important to you in your life. Because the more you do it with any one person, the more you'll be good at the next person, the more you'll be good at it with the next people, and you actually get better at listening and learning others' perspectives and using their perspective to communicate with them. It really can be that cool. So Helen said today that one of the things she appreciated about this group here of all of you coming together is the amazing support. And that, usually takes a lot of time to build a community, and it's impressive that you guys have done so well, so quickly. In only 6 months, you've got this established community where people feel comfortable and excited to be here. So that's just fantastic. So I would challenge you with, just as it takes time to build a community, even with that one person you've been picturing in your life, it takes time to make changes, right? So don't be too hard on yourself or them as you're trying this and it's not going. Jody said this would work immediately, right? It's not working just magic formula and the Mr. Clean magic eraser that really is magic if you've used them. Okay, you've got to give yourself time to learn to see it, right? So that you're recognizing your own style, what you're doing, and then you're learning what they're doing, learning their language, and then you're starting to adapt a little bit to each other. Those are the pieces, but it's going to take time. Now, when you do that, you'll find you get so far after time that you can actually speak some of the same language with them, like if the Spanish and English person learned enough of each other's language that they could really talk to each other more and better. And you'll have less frustration, and you'll have more satisfaction in every relationship that you're doing this with. And then it leads into the group dynamics of a fantastic community like you have here. So my challenge to you is try to do these a little bit every time with just the one person. Start there. That's really important to you that you're picturing. Because as we say here at Oasis, meaning comes from making a difference.
For Jody? I don't know where to start first.
Ryan.
keep the same kind would have an easier time communicating, but
That,
sometimes.
that is an excellent question, Brian. So, how many of you have ever heard, oh, you're just like your mom, or you're just like your dad, and that's the parent you clash with the most? Okay? Often, direct people will clash with each other a lot because they both want to do everything, you know, and say everything that comes to their mind. Difference is they'll move on quickly. Two direct people, the relationship isn't harmed the way when you've got opposites. Non-assertion, oh, I don't care where you want to eat. I don't care where you want to eat. Well, that's like Brian said earlier, you know, you're being too nice. Oh, I don't want anything. I'm going to pie. Right? So they're going to have an easier time on the surface, but things will still fester because neither of them are telling each other what's really bothering them, but it is bothering them. So it will affect their relationship more because they don't feel as safe with that person, but they didn't told them that, and vice versa, the other person hasn't told them that. So you still have challenges, even when you're with the same people. When you're both in the middle, and again, I do not feel like assertion is the magic formula, but when you're both fairly assertive, and you don't get too far, you know, into codes of hints, and you don't get too far into too much aggression, that's the easiest because you're speaking the same language and you're trying not to step on each other, right? So certainly, you know, great if that's the case. But like, you know, like I said, I'm mostly assertive, but I was yelling at my husband, and I had to go. It doesn't matter that my volume didn't change. It matters that my tone was aggressive enough that that's how he felt about it. Brad, is it Brad?
And listening to all this, I see a lot of times there's some instances where I'm not assertive, some instances where I'm very assertive and direct. How do I know when to be non-assertive, when to be direct, and how they are responding to that? Because I feel I have this entire spectrum depending on what is coming.
Depending on the...
Or the topic. Or some things I'm very comfortable with saying very direct things, some things I don't want to discuss or ruffle feathers.
So let me see if Helen can answer that question. Communication is all about the audience. So it depends on who the other person is. So if it's like a lot of us are different at work than we are at home. Fair? Okay. If at work you've got a person that you're less assertive with, maybe it's your boss, and so there's a status difference. Maybe they're just very direct, and you're just not worth dealing with. Or you're the direct one, and you're just like, what are they talking about? Not getting the code. You know, you've got to do the same thing. You've got to think, what is that person trying to communicate with me? Okay. So one of the things you can do for yourselves is if you are less direct, realize the direct person is not trying to push your buttons. They did not get up in the morning going, how can I just take Jody off today? They're not trying to hurt you, right? And if you're direct, you have to realize the other person is feeling hurt or offended. And you've got to realize, is that what you want? Most of the time, not. So then you've got to find a way to come back to that. Another thing that the Mayo Clinic article said was, you know, you should lean into conversations to be more assertive. And I'm going, not if you're a direct communicator. If you're an aggressive, direct aggression person, you got to lean out so that the other person doesn't feel threatened. Okay, so you start to kind of match and mirror a little bit of each other's speech, tone, body language, all those things. So it's really common to be different in different situations with different people. And the main answer is, what is the other person trying to do? How can I learn what they're saying or trying to say to me? And communicate in a way they will understand it. And even if it's a person at work that you don't get to go, let's try this together, you know, let's meet in the middle. If you do it enough, you will find they will start almost invariably. It may take time, but they will usually start meeting you back. Excellent question. Yeah?
So you said the conversation is in the audience. It's one of my friends recently has been saying, well, it is about Oasis, that in person people are different than they are on the internet.
Oh,
So
absolutely.
it's the same two people having a conversation. Why is that audience change?
Absolutely. When you've got your usual styles in person, and then you put that same person, their styles online, are almost always going to change. And it's not always the same direction. We used to think that usually people are more willing to say something, that they're more direct online because they don't have to face it. They don't have to own it, okay? But because of online's gotten so huge, some people have gone the other way, and they're very careful what they say online, or they're very careful with privacy things. So they won't be they won't seem as real online because they're being careful. I mean, you know, some people don't want to put pictures of their kids on their Facebook because that seems scary. It's not worth it to them. Okay? So the online whole world, we gotta again give each other the benefit of the doubt because we don't know, are they being careful because of us, or are they just being careful because it's online? Are they being a little bit, you know, direct because they don't have to face it, but yet that's how they really feel, and if we're the more direct side, that's what we wanted, right? So, yeah, absolutely.
I was thinking, one of the things you touched on briefly, you didn't focus on too much, but I feel like it's underlying everything here, is the managing of expectations. The managing of yours and their expectations seems to be a really key in avoiding those kind of
Absolutely, absolutely. If you're trying to meet each other in the middle, wherever your language goes, and you were willing to ask some questions, you said this, or you did with your body language that, here's what I read in that. Was I reading that correctly? Okay? Because you're asking them, this is what I was expecting. I got something different. What were you meaning to say, and what were you expecting from me? That's one of the best things you can do. A lot of places you'll read it as perception checking. So roommates come home, and one goes, hey, how was your day? And the other goes, oh, it's really stressful. Oh, horrible day. Oh, sorry. And the person saying, there's my, we just said I had a horrible day. They just walked out of the room. Because that person would have wanted someone to leave them alone. That's what they were expecting. Switch it up. Horrible day, horrible day. Oh, really, what happened? I'm going to leave it behind. Well, was it so-and-so? What? I just said I had a bad day, and you're giving me the third degree. Because that's what that person would have wanted, was questions and drawn out, and let's get it on the table and talk about it. So that's what they would have done, so that's what they were expecting the other to do. And that all goes not just to conflict, but listening. So the only way to be a good listener is, what does the person talking want you to do? Do they want questions? Do they want silence and you just really listen? Do they want advice? Do they want interruptions? Can't be the same, can't be a truly good listener unless you're a different listener for who is talking. So absolutely. What was your question, Susan?
Going back to the online situation, one of the key piece of information that's missing from everything online is the nonverbal communication.
Mm-hmm.
And we've actually, in my work, have had to have etiquette classes on business email and how to say things. People one person will write something and suddenly, I can't believe what I did. She just came out and about, but I didn't mean that.
Right.
I really think, particularly when you're dealing with non-assertive people,
Mm-hmm.
they tell you all kinds of things all the time. But a lot of if you don't know the language, you can't see it.
Right. Well, and you're right. I was hired to do that in Springfield, Missouri for American Society of Women Accountants because they had so much challenge with electronic communication. And when do you even choose to use electronic communication versus not? And what do you do and say when you have it? In general, direct people will give very much less information. Quick highlights, and so their emails will seem abrupt to the other side. Less direct will give more information because they're not relying on you to read, all the other things. And so they're going to give more information, and direct person's going to be like, just tell me the basics. This is way too long an email. Right? So again, you've got a difference of expectations. And then of course there's a lot of, in between. But when it's the two extremes, people can get very offended. We'll even talk about, even though it's missing, the tone of an email, right? But you're missing the eye contact, you're missing the smile that maybe softens what seems harsh just in words, just reading it. That could have been the only thing that was needed to smooth it over. Yeah.
One more question, and it could be brief.
Right here.
In a situation where you practice this about doing this, you go through and say, I'm going to do this, or this is what I'm going to do. They have to resolve, one person says they want to go out, and one says, I want you to, they're going to, it happens. How do you handle that situation? You're talking about how they're talking, so what happens when we have disagreements as to what should be done?
Okay, that's excellent. Is it Gilbert? It's an excellent question. So what I've been talking about is the way that you're fighting or having conflict, which often ends up being what you're arguing about is the way you were arguing, the way you were talking to each other, right? The underlying problem, still there, which is what Gilbert's asking about. Yes, but what do you do about the actual decision? Do you go out anyway, even though they're mad, or do you say, hey, it's cool for you to go out, even though it's not how you really felt? And all I can tell you is that is going to be, different every time and different with the different people. So when that happens, you got to think, is it worth it to me that this person's going to be upset? Can we compromise and take them with us? What are your options? And every single situation is different. But at least when you've got the way that you're talking, the way that you're arguing, that you've got a little bit on the same page, that you're not now fighting about the way you were fighting, at least you can deal with the original issue. You look at any of this stuff in books or online or anything, you'll find that people talk about win-win, right? And some people even say compromise is a bad word. I absolutely do not agree with that. I mean, compromise has to happen at least some of the time. So maybe if you gave in last time, hey, I need this right now. Or maybe if the other person, so there's just no easy answer to that because there's so many different facets of what's going on. But I would say the same thing. Think about if you were in their position, how you would think, how you would feel. Okay? There's two fantastic books by Deborah Tannen. One's called That's Not What I Meant, and one's called You Just Don't Understand. And it talks about, not all, but largely gender differences. And so a lot of this, probably many of you, how many of you were picturing your romantic partner when you pictured the one person that, not as funny as usual. But that's where we see it a lot, because it's the person we're around a lot, and it's the person that we tend to, opposites attract. So we tend to have different styles from each other, and even the pausing in communication is different. So you have to just keep remembering that the decision also, what to actually do, needs to be together. And if you're trying to make a decision together as much as you can, then the process becomes a win-win. And the result ends up amazingly not being as important to them as they thought some of the time. Does that make sense? I know it's not a command from. Do we? Yeah, okay, sorry. Ask me after. Yeah.
All right.